Well, hello, welcome. My name is Jenny Garwood, and I am the curator of textiles here at MESDA and also an education coordinator with the Old Salem Education Learning in Place team. Sorry. I'm just here to welcome you because we are going to be exploring objects here today in this textile gallery. So please feel free to send in questions. We want this to be a little bit like a tour experience if you were able to come and join us today. So please feel free to engage us and ask questions. We're going to be looking at objects. If you're not familiar with the MESDA collection, we are looking at things from the early South. So things from the states of Maryland, Virginia, North and South Carolina, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Georgia. And our time period is going to be, well, MESDA's time period encompasses around 1600s to the mid 1800s. Really what we're looking at with the textiles, we have things from the late 1700s on exhibit today, most in the 1820s, 30s, 40s, up to 1850. So those are the things that we're looking at. We're also going to look at a variety of textiles today. So we have everything from counterpanes, which would be embroidered bed coverings, to a bed rug. We have woven coverlets. We've got chintz applique quilts, we've got some pieced quilts, and we have some other objects that we have pulled out, including white work embroidered coverlets as well. So feel free to let me know the things that you're interested in, and we may have a few surprises for you.
Well, you only have one comment so far, and it's from Pauline, and she says hi. So
oh, hello, Pauline. Hello, Pauline.
Go ahead and get started with your presentation.
Absolutely. So we can look at a lot of different things and a lot of different time periods. If we want to take a walk first, we might go and look at one of the earliest pieces of textile in our collection. So if you would like to do that, okay. Well, we're going to get started in our Cherry Grove room. So this room looks at objects from the Chesapeake area of Virginia, North Carolina, and Maryland. And we're looking at things in the early to mid 1700s. So one of the really important pieces in our collection, I'll start, and we'll talk about this bed, this wonderful Eastern North Carolina bed that we have one of our early bed coverings on. So this bed, one of the really kind of interesting things, and I don't know if you can see it or not, but the feet are these hoof feet. And this was one of the prized parts of the early MESDA collection that Frank Horton, our founder, was especially fond of. But the bed covering on here today is going to be an embroidered coverlet. So if you can remember, if you were able to join us when we were looking at needlework samplers and the work of young girls, as young girls got older into young women, one of the things that they did is they took these embroidery and needlework skills and they were able to apply them onto a bed covering. Now this one is from, we know the girl that we have attributed to a girl named Oni, O-N-E-Y, Oni Bolton.
Oh, do you think it's like Oni, like Naomi, like the nickname for Naomi?
Oh, I don't know. I've only seen it listed as O-N-E-Y, but it very well could be. Very well could be. But Bolton, and Bolton is B-O-U-L-T-O-N. And she and her family were from Virginia, and I believe it was like Pittsylvania County, Virginia, kind of over the North Carolina line. They end up moving to Caswell County. But we're dating this based on the provenance and her life term, probably late 1700s, possibly early 1800s. And what she is doing is she is stitching this sort of palampour design, this tree of life. And you'll see these birds and a lot of floral and fauna, and even some really kind of interesting feathers on it. But what's interesting about it is in her father's inventory in 1803, we know that they had weaving equipment. So we believe that the cloth that this was made on most likely was part of their home production. The dyes and the colors that are used very well could have been home production as well. So this is one of the more simplistic pieces that you're going to see, but it did take a great deal of skill and expertise to execute something like this. So what we're going to see too when we go back into the textile gallery, and we're going to look a little bit closer at chintz applique, and you're going to see a lot of the same motifs that you're seeing here on this counterpane on those other fabrics.
Great, and Jenny, I just set it up so the chat is actually going to pop up in the window here so we can see anybody's questions.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, great. I'm making Samantha walk and carry today. Okay, that's our last trip over there. So now we can sort of live in this area. We've got one other gallery to visit today. But as we were looking at the birds and that decorative motif that was on Oni Bolton's counterpane, you can see here with the chintz applique, the same idea as using these really, this would be using very expensive fabrics that they would have cut out, appliqued on, and made this very individual design. So the chintz applique quilts are going to be very fashionable from, you're going to see them, you know, in the late 1700s, early 1800s, but really sort of taking hold in the South in the 1830s, 40s, even up to 1850. You're going to see before they fall totally out of fashion. But you just see a whole lot of decorative motifs going on here. So other things we're going to look at today is woven coverlets, and a bed rug, which we'll save that for a little bit later because Samantha's been walking around a lot. We won't make her leave again. So we can talk about some things in this room. Do we have any questions yet?
Well, I set it up so that questions can pop up. I'm not seeing them, but I did see some below. Someone said, I love the blanket chested.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And we have a comment from Amber Seaman who said, it was me, but I'm not sure if she was replying.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, and Victoria says, love the quilts. Amazing, they were sewn by hand.
Absolutely. So everything you're going to see here, we're predating the sewing machine on all of this. So we're really going to see the work, the handiwork of women for the most part. So we'll talk about some of the men in a minute. But are there any things that people are just kind of catching people's eye? We can talk more. I did bring some things out from storage to share with people today. So we have a couple different techniques to talk about. One, I'll go back to the chintz applique, and I'm not sure if they can see or not. Okay, I can go back to the chintz applique, and really, if you're not familiar with that form, and you're looking, and if you're just thinking about quilts and what they should look like, a lot of people think about pieced and applique quilts. And a lot of people aren't as familiar with this form of quilt that was hugely popular in America as well as England for a pretty long period of time. And what they're using is very expensive imported English chintz fabrics. And you can sort of see on them many opposite. So basically what they're doing is taking a piece of fabric very much like this, and this one actually...
I think we lost a little bit of that intro. If you don't mind repeating the chintz fabric.
Okay, of the chintz fabric that was imported, very expensive. This piece too, you can still see that original glazing on. But what they're doing is taking this very expensive fabric, cutting out different motifs, such as a bird. And this is a pattern that was produced by a lot of different manufacturers in England that was called pheasant and plum tree. In fact, you see pheasant and plum tree, a variation of that in this quilt as well. So essentially they're taking these elements, cutting them out, and then appliquing them onto a cotton ground fabric. And creating a brand new design, basically, out of these.
Absolutely stunning, and it's so big too. This quilt seems huge.
It is, and a lot of people are really surprised by that and thinking, how big were their beds? Were they have king size beds? But the thing to remember is that beds during this time period didn't necessarily go out; they went up. And so what you're seeing here is a quilt, this is Southampton County, Virginia, but we have actually had this quilt exhibited on this board, and it fills every bit of this board. It really just takes up the entire space. Yet when you take it off of this and you place it on a bed, and how their beds would have been with the different mattresses and feathers, the feather mattresses that really fluffed up, is you put it on this bed and it really takes up kind of all of that extra fabric. So they are making making these quilts so large to accommodate the all of the different mattresses and things that they would have put on it.
Jenny, do we know how long it would have taken to make one of these quilts?
That is a great question, and oh my goodness, boy, I wish I had the answer, because it could be any amount of time. You've got an incredible amount of work that goes into these, but you also have a diversity of work as well. So you also have quilts being a social thing. We have lots of documentation of women and families getting together to finish quilts and to put them, to piece them together and working as community. You also have the work of the enslaved. And so while someone may have spent time piecing them, it is very likely that you do have the enslaved of a household working on the actual quilting in many, many cases. So in that, the more hands you have, the faster this process is going to go. If you were doing this process from the very beginning, it takes an incredibly long period of time. Any of you have ever quilted and you're doing all of it by hand, you realize it's very tedious work. But these women were very skilled. They are learning their needlework skills basically from the time that they can hold a needle, and they are able to produce and hem sheets, and in their education, they are doing things like needlework samplers and becoming very, very proficient. So that's just a really difficult question because you have a lot of skilled needleworkers. You have a variety of different people working on these. And so that all is going to kind of tie into the length that would take to produce something like this. Do we have any other questions?
Thanks, Jenny. I just checked, not right now. We did have the stream for a second. We are back strong.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, we can talk about, okay, one of the things a lot of people really, this quilt, and I just mentioned it a minute ago, this would be a pieced quilt. And one of the things that I really wanted to bring, that this is a wonderful piece. It's so pleasing to the eye. Everything about it is wonderful, but there's one thing about it that is absolute gold. And that is, Samantha, I don't know if you can see the inscription that was written on it. So quilts become very much heirlooms within families. And in this case, this was a quilt made by a mother for her son. And one of the things that she did that we absolutely love is that she dated it. So when we talk about quilts and we know of a range that certain things could be made, when you have someone that actually places a date on it, that just is so very valuable. But it also gives us the name of the maker. And when you have that information, it makes you able to put skin and bones and learn so much more about it. So
we have a question here. Could you please say more about how groups came together to make quilts? Can you document quilting communities or groups? Also, if you could repeat the question I asked because they can't hear me at all.
Oh, okay. So the question was about quilting communities and how women came together as groups. You know, one of the things I love to do is read historic diaries and read firsthand primary source documentation to find out from the women who made things what their lives were like during that time period. And you do see this kind of over and over and over again, whether it was social occasions. They would often, especially in the Chesapeake area of Virginia, many of these people lived in a little bit of isolation. And so there was a lot of time for community and for friends and family to come visit. And there's quite a bit of documentation that friends and family would come together and work on textiles. You also have communities where families live very, very close together. And I can talk a little bit about this. We've got two quilts over here that we call the Palmer quilts, and they descended in a family of prolific quilters from Charleston, South Carolina. So we have the work of a grandmother and a mother, and they made these for two of their children. So we have a child's quilt over here, instated 1840, and it was made by a grandmother for her granddaughter and namesake, Harriet Palmer. And one of the things I'll point out, since you're showing this one close up, so this is a child's quilt, a chintz, very expensive chintz fabrics. It still has the glazing on it. So obviously wasn't used a whole lot, but if you want to take note of the quilting, the Palmers and Marion families were large enslavers. And so in this family, there were quite a bit of hands more than likely working on their quilts. So if you see the quilting on this, and it's just basic what they call crosshatch quilting. This is a very utilitarian style of quilting. It is sort of a kind of a get it done type process. So, you know, when you look at a piece like this, while we don't know how many hands were involved in the making of this, you know, we can, understanding the social strata of the time period, you know, make some, you know, sort of think about this. And this very well could have been a place that the enslaved were finishing these quilts, where Harriet is making this for her granddaughter. She's piecing it, and this would have been handed to the enslaved to finish. Another quilt made by a mother and daughter, and this would be Harriet, the same 10 years later, for a son. We kind of get tickled because this thing is huge, and this was very labor intensive, this little mosaic quilt. And they have what they call fussy cut, a lot of these little octagons, and they're basically taking the best of a little pattern and plucking it out. But one of the things I wanted to show you on this one is the actual signature, and I'm going to pull back this little corner. So once again, when you were able to have this as a record, it is gold. So here we're seeing Harriet, no, John G. Palmer from his grandmother and then mother. So that was John Gendron Palmer, her youngest grandson, and from his grandmother and mother. So we have two examples that might be kind of surprising to people of quilts in our collection made by grandmothers for their sons and grandsons. We kind of think about these as a female type object, but are made for men as well. So speaking of men, we're going to talk about an area where we have men contributing to bed covers. So if you notice this piece over here, I kind of want to start with that one if we can. Okay, this is what's called a Jacquard woven coverlet. So while you do have home production and weavers making overshot coverlets, you do have professional weavers working, and many times these professional weavers were men. And this whole process, this was sort of cutting edge technology for the time period of these Jacquard woven looms. And they would have had individual cards that basically dictated their pattern. So these could be customized. Many of these weavers had their own customized card, which basically allowed them to have the name of a maker and sometimes potentially even put the name of the person that they are making it for. But in this case, we have got made by H. Wilson. So that's Hugh Wilson, working in Kentucky, 1846. So this piece is giving us all the information we really need to know. We're able to do a little bit of research, and we know that Hugh Wilson is a Quaker, and he is living and working in Kentucky. However, we have another bed covering that kind of continues the story of Hugh Wilson. So we come over here at this example, and we look back at his little personalization, his little block, and he's once again saying made by H. Wilson. But what's kind of interesting is Kentucky has been out. So he's adapted this weaving card to take away Kentucky and this original information, because now he has moved on to Indiana, and it is 1850. So we're a few years later. He is still working as a weaver, and he is still personalizing his work and signing his work. So this would be the work of men. Not always, but these professional Jacquard weavers typically were men.
Great.
So
let's check and see if we have any questions.
Okay.
A lot of people are just saying, I love that quilt. You're absolutely stunning. Completely agree. Have you talked about?
Do we want to look at the bed rug? Okay.
Let's do it.
I want to show you something incredibly rare. And something that might be a little bit surprising to people. In the South, we talk a little bit about like inventories and how we know what people had. We can get so much information about people and the type of textiles they had through inventories that were done typically upon the death of the head of household. So we know through these inventories that many households had what was called a bed rug. Oftentimes they are spelled with two G's, R-U-G-G, and they are listed within the context of other textiles or what they call bed furniture or bed furnishings in these inventories. However, in the South, very few of these bed rugs survive. In fact, I only know of two. One that we have in our collection, and Colonial Williamsburg has one in theirs. So this is the only the surviving bed rug that we have from Wythe County, Virginia. And what is interesting, we talk about personalization, and this one we have some initials that show up on it, EG. And I don't think I've got where the date is. Yep, I do. Okay, and then we have an 825, because this has been shortened at some time. So this was made in 1825 by Elizabeth. Yes. See,
oh, wow.
So we're missing the one, but it's 825 by Elizabeth Gibney. And so the Gibneys, and I may be pronouncing that totally wrong, but it's Gibboney. They immigrated, their family immigrated from Ireland. So it's sort of the understanding that they're bringing a lot of their traditions and what they knew how to do into the backcountry of Virginia. So this is a bed rug as it would have gone on a bed. It gets cold and we'll be glad to have. They're incredibly warm. They're made from wool and a linen ground. I wanted to show, a lot of years ago, some folks at Colonial Williamsburg made a reproduction piece to sort of show how this would have looked in its day. I don't know if you can see, but there are little, this is sort of made up of a lot of little, what they call turkey knots that have been shortened. So originally they believed that it would have had more of a shag, almost like a shag rug texture to it. And this is very much emulating the ground, the woven ground that was linen and wool that it is stitched on. So just a little bit of something that is incredibly rare. We put it in, this is our Valley of Virginia gallery, and which is Wythe County would be sort of considered in that part of the world of the South. But one of the things I thought when I laid it in here the other day, I thought how amazing the color palette. So what you're seeing with the color palette with this bed rug, and then you're able to compare it to the color palette that is on this painted Spittler, Johann Spittler chest, and the color palette that kind of surrounds everyone in this room, very much part of the region and part of the time period.
Jenny,
So,
going back to the weaving,
yes.
Why were men weavers and women, did it take more strength or something?
That's a great question. I don't know. I know that those looms, and I'm not saying this is the answer because I don't know that it is. I know those Jacquard looms were massive. I mean, they were massive. But that's a great question. I don't have the answer to that. I don't know.
Yeah,
I know that
women did weave as well.
they did. They did. And we can go look at some of the work that could have happened in fact, there's one I know of that was woven by a woman, but some of the overshot work. You want to look at that?
Yeah.
Okay. So another way I think to sort of think about textiles and the hands that are making them, and maybe looking a little bit deeper, while we don't have any documentation that these overshot coverlets were made by enslaved. This is an example. This came from a plantation in Coffee County, Tennessee. It descended in the family of Mary Willis, and she was a widow, and she ran this plantation. So this had always been attributed to Mary Willis. Now, whether she's the weaver or not, we don't know for sure. However, in her estate, we do know that there were looms and there was weaving equipment. And when you do see that, and she did have slaves, that very well could have been the source of the production of something like this. We also have these weaving drafts, and we have two of them on the wall. And the other one over there actually has the name of Margaret Williams. Margaret Williams and her sister Martha lived in western North Carolina, Buncombe County, kind of near Asheville. They moved to Alabama. And these weaving, they call them drafts or patterns, survive. And these were made for looms that would have woven these overshot Coverlet. So that one, I think that one, it says on it, Lady's Delight was the name of the pattern. And so one of our very good friends of the music, Suzanne McDowell, who's a master weaver, she was able to reproduce these historic patterns, what they would have looked like. Because the pattern, it almost looks like sheet music. But she was able to reproduce. So that was Lady's Delight for Margaret Williams. And this is what they describe as Kentucky Beauty. So this was the pattern. And we do know that this family, the Prudes and Williams, were prolific weavers. And a lot of their equipment and things have, or their inventory describing all of their equipment has survived. But we can also talk about weaving other things. We got blankets, other different types of, so I've got a surprise. So we're going to open this up. So we're going to look at, so what you're seeing in this cabinet is sort of a variety of things. So we have Piedmont, North Carolina woven blankets. And one of the things I think that always surprises people over and over again is the color and the intensity. We think of historic objects as being kind of dull and muted, but there was quite a bit of color in the objects that they're doing. So here's another example of an overshot coverlet, like we were seeing over there, and that the Williams had woven in their patterns. And here's another example we see made by D. Cosley. This is Dennis Cosley. So this is another example of a Jacquard woven coverlet. So his color palette's a little different. His patterns, his cards are a little bit different. But you can see a little example of his work. And he did very much like Hugh Wilson did. He works in Kentucky before he moves. That's how many of these guys did. It's like they were a little bit itinerant, where they would work for a period of time and then move on to a new sort of customer base, I guess you could say. And this is just a beautiful color palette this is Piedmont, North Carolina woven blanket. Yeah, they really are.
Very surprising because, as you said, people just assume everything was bland
and
neutral.
Exactly. Just like maybe more this. This
Right.
is kind of more what you would sort of expect.
Exactly.
But you can look through here and just see variety. It's quite amazing.
Can you show us some of the special things you have on the table?
I would love to. Put this all back.
Oh, our friend from Black Country Museum is here.
Oh, wonderful.
Hi, Jay. Nice to see you.
We're going to head over here to this table. So a lot of times people have questions about paper piecing and sometimes called piecing. We have a lot of examples of that being done in the South. And this is probably in 1850. This is a silk, some remnant pieces. Obviously, when people were talking about starting quilts and how long they took, this might have been an occasion where somebody kind of started this and like, wow, this is taking a long time. So this is what we have. They never finished this quilt. So here you're looking at the back, and here is the front. Now these are all, I think I said silk pieces, but if you look closely at the back, they are basting these around little pieces of paper, and we're seeing sort of remnants of letters and correspondence that's cutting out, basting around, and then piecing these together. Certainly would have been tedious work.
Do
But
you think they would pick correspondence that was meaningful, or do you think they just were using it kind of like scrap trash?
that's interesting. I don't know. Wouldn't it be great? I mean, we would never do it, but to pull all, maybe you could piece it together and see, is this something they would have burned? They didn't want anybody to know?
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. That is really kind of, I'm thinking of something like me that meant a whole lot, and I didn't want anything to, I probably wouldn't cut it up. But,
Right.
if this is, another letter from someone, and you're just like,
This person again, we can use that for the scrap.
Yeah, maybe they're kind of sorting them as they come in. This goes in our quilting. Yeah, this is our quilting. This needs to go away. So we did talk about this a little bit, and we talked about this, right? Or was that before?
No, we haven't.
No, we haven't talked about it. Okay, see it all. Yeah, we were on TikTok Live earlier and talked about a lot of different things. Okay, So another technique, in fact, this is a great thing I wanted to show because people who are quilters and people who are really interested in technique and how things are made are always kind of fascinated about this.
Oh,
and
yeah, and Jenny, I forgot. Make
yes.
sure you repeat the questions because they can't hear
Oh,
me.
oh, okay, okay. Okay, yes, yes. So this is an example where I think this is definitely overachieving. Once again, this is a remnant piece. This was never finished. So we're seeing, you know, of just a small portion. So there's a technique called Trapunto. That's sort of a modern day term. They would not have called it that in the 1900s or in the 1800s and 1700s. However, they would have probably referred to it as stuffed and corded. So if you look at the back of this, so you've got this dimension to it. And if you look at the back of it, what they've done is they put a loosely woven cotton fabric and they've stitched out their design, and they're able to sort of stuff little pieces of cotton and cording throughout it, and it makes this, you know, kind of raised design. But the other thing this person did is you have this sort of triangular medallion kind of coming through as the sashing of this quilt. And this is not applique on top. This is pieced in, which than it would be if they had just decided to but anyway, this was a, you know, very, very ambitious piece. Has a provenance in Charleston, South Carolina, but I've never seen anything quite like this one. Another example we have on exhibit is this dressing table cover, which was another kind of thing. You know, we're talking about girls making samplers, and they were young, and then they're going to make, you know, ordered bed coverings and quilts. This was made by a young woman from Annapolis, Maryland, and her name was Anne Ashmead. And Samantha's kind of zooming in right now to show that she actually stuffed, corded her name and the date of, I think, 1823. Is that what it says? And incredible amount of work. So this would have been a textile that would have accompanied, either laid on her dressing table, potentially a dresser. That's not a new concept. That was something that goes way, way back, to have pieces of textiles that sort of accompany furniture. It's definitely a showpiece. You're going to put something out there very valuable and more. So that they actually, and they made bed coverings very much like that. But I did want to show a white work bed covering out here too. This is from Kentucky. So, and this one is dated, oh my goodness, I think it's 18. I don't have the date handy. I can't remember where it is on it, but I did kind of want to show you kind of front and back of the technique. So this is a little bit tufted, where they would have gone in and made all these little knots and then come back and trimmed them to make these. A lot of people think about it like candle wicking, and it kind of, you know, that same kind of technique. But you'd see a lot of the same things that you're seeing on a lot of the beds, where it's vines and botanicals and
like grapes,
and then grapes. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So anyway, I just wanted to show. This was from oh gosh, I think it's Woodford County, Kentucky, is where this woman lived, Anne Hutchinson McGee. There's a funny story about Anne Hutchinson McGee because she's in, I mean, very rural area. And so this bed actually came to us in a very kind of bizarre way. And this doesn't happen very often. But one of the local ministries in town that has a thrift shop had this come in, and they were like, and it had a little note that was attached to it that said, this was made by Anne Hutchinson McGee. And it kind of gave a little bit of background. And they were like, well, you know, we think this, you know, would y'all look at this? We think this might need to be in a museum. And when we saw it, it was incredible. The condition of it, everything about it's incredible. And then a few years later, we were going through a lot of our textile collection and kind of looking over the records again and seeing if we could glean any more information. And there's a white work quilt that was made by, and the name associated with it was, I can't remember her name. It was later, and I was like, well, that's way too late for that. It just didn't look right. Went through the records again, found that some information had been sort of repeated wrong. Long story short, the maker of this other white work quilt, And this actually quilted, but it's a white work bed covering, came from none other than Anne Hutchinson McKee. And if you could know how rural and how small this was, she had like 4 daughters, and past one went to one daughter, one went to the other, and you can follow the provenance all over the country, both in Winston-Salem in the 1970s, 1980s. I mean, and probably never knowing each other because they were descended so far away from each other. But isn't that kind of almost bizarre how that happens? But yeah, the example of a white work bed covering.
It's beautiful. Can you talk a little bit about the tassels?
The tassels.
The
oh, the border on it. Yeah. Now these were done. Okay, it's impossible for me to tell. There are people that much more smarter than me about this. Sometimes these were homemade. My guess would be that this one was homemade. These could also be bought, but it was not uncommon to see fringe or these borders put on these white work and some other bed coverings as well. It was just a way to finish them off. Typically, they were done around 3 sides. So the head part would not have had it, but the other 3 would have. And then I've got this sitting on, we brought this out of storage, and I just love this piece. People always ask you, like, what are your favorite pieces? What are your favorite pieces? And I love them all. But this is a sewing table. It's attributed to Bourbon County, Kentucky. So it's a Kentucky piece. It's a very unusual sewing table, very exaggerated legs. Just has a lot going on in this table. But I remember when it came into the collection, and our chief curator at the time said, Jenny, come look at this sewing table. And I'm like, okay. And I'm looking at it like, so what makes a sewing table? Why are you saying this is a sewing table? Because it doesn't look like any others. So he opens this drawer. And I'm like, oh, well, that's great. But okay, but what makes this a sewing table? And then he did this. Let me see if I can get it open. And I just love that. So, and then to make it even better, on the other side, so this drawer is literally like half the size of the table. On the other side, there's another drawer. So 2 women could be sitting at this table and each working on their needlework, and this is their pincushion. So, and then there's all these little compartments. So those of you who do needlework will know that, oh, you can, you know, your thread and your pins. And anyway, it's just a really cool piece. It's just a really cool piece. But love this one.
Well, speaking of pulling things out of the collection, in an upcoming live, we're hoping to go into the collection.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. We're going to be looking at a lot of chintz applique quilts, and you will not believe the variety in what we're going to be able to see. We're going to see a lot of different time periods. If there's anything specific anybody would like to see, let us know in the future. We are here to bring out whatever you want to see. We have a vast collection. If you go on MESDA.org, you can see more of it. If there's things that you see online that you would like to know more about, don't hesitate to contact us, because we would love to share anything we have with you all.
Absolutely. And I'm not seeing any more questions, Jenny, but Tara did say, I love that so much. And so do I. I think that's just a really amazing design.
Yeah, I love it too.
Emily said we need Ben to make one.
Can he please? Seriously,
Yeah,
I would,
please.
I'd be all about it.
Me too. Well, do we have any questions for Jenny while we're here in the textile gallery? And if not, if you wanted to leave us a comment. Oh, I just remember people can't really hear me.
Oh, okay. Okay, absolutely. And I'll repeat what Samantha was saying. But yeah, feel free to leave comments, send us questions, anything else that you would like to know about. We're here. We love to engage with you all, and just let us know what we can do.
And Jenny, Barbara Garrett asked, what chintz program did you allude to? So can you talk more about the program that we're going to do about chintz?
Oh, and Barbara Garrett. I know Barbara Garrett. Hello, Barbara Garrett. Let's see. We're going to be looking at, we're going to go down into storage. And as of right now, what we're kind of thinking about is doing sort of a quilt turning like we would have done, and that I know Barbara has been at, doing sort of a quilt turning and pulling things out of storage and getting these things out. They're ready to be seen. So we'll be looking at many of our chintz applique quilts. If there's anything in specific that you'd like to see, just, let us know, because we would love to get it out, and we would love to. Absolutely, absolutely. Almost all of it is on there. There might be a few things that are not, but I mean, Yeah, MESDA.org, MESDA.org. You can also access it on the Old Salem website. So if you get to the oldsalem.org, you can sort of link over to MESDA. So yeah, feel free. We would love to bring out all kinds of things.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Unless there was anything else you wanted to show us today.
I think we are good, unless there's anything anyone else wants to see.
Not that I'm seeing.
Okay.
So I think we are going to call it here, but thank you
Sounds
so
good.
much for your time, Jenny.
Well, thank you all, everyone, for.
Barbara says when.
I did.
Have a date
Oh,
yet.
it's in. Is it April? Maybe. Just stay tuned. Just keep checking in. And
live like this one.
exactly.
So we'll see you on an upcoming Friday.
Yes.
Some advance notice.
Yes. Absolutely.
Thank you all so much. Have a great weekend.